Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Business of Talent panel. My name is Emma Rose Rowell, and I'm a team member at Impact 24 Public Relations. And I'm super excited to be here today speaking with each of our panelists. And I'd love if you could please join me in welcoming them. So first up, we have Cyrus Sadie, an artist manager at Cyrus Talent Management. So next we have Arbel Bidak, the owner and creative agent at Spectra Creative Agency. And then following that, we have Jen Caprio, a talent agent at Eastern Talent Agency. And then last but not least, we have Andrew Seth Cohen, the Director of Publicity at Impact 24 Public Relations. And these questions are going to be open for everyone, so please feel free to jump in and answer whenever you guys feel fit. And I'd love to start with asking, first of all, so we'll start with Cyrus for this one. What advice do you give to clients looking to establish themselves in their respective fields?
For me, the most important advice I've learned is to encourage them to find their own voice, whatever their medium of talent is, whether they're a writer, director, musician. Finding your own voice eventually, obviously, it's not easy. It's easier said than done, but finding that I think will resonate much more than anything else in this industry.
Definitely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I personally work primarily with composers and music supervisors, and that's definitely a very important thing. Finding your style, finding maybe it's something to do with the way you approach music. Being confident in what your strengths are and in what you want to be doing, and really leaning into. Into that. I think a lot of people try to cover too much ground sometimes because they just want to be able to mold to any project. But I actually think there's a lot of power in actually really putting out there and focusing in on the craft, like the direction you want to go. If it's a certain genre space, if it's a certain style, certain approach to the music. So it's something I talk a lot about with clients.
Yeah, definitely. Also, from like a more the creative aspect is super important. I'm a below the line agent, obviously repping the artists behind the camera, and even just getting the experience, even as support staff in the field that you want to that you're going towards. If you want to be a costume designer, like get on set, be a costume PA, come up through, get those costume supervisor, etc. That, from our perspective, the creative and whatever everyone wants to do with their career is super important. Then ultimately to sell you to some of these studios and everything else, like we have to be able to show the build, or the trajectory at least there has to be a solid foundation there. So whatever the job is in your field, whatever the support position is, do it, because it will help that resume.
Yeah.
And I think
I would just add too.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
No. I was just going to add to to also just like be out there and be building relationships and meeting people. I'm sure we'll get into this a lot talking about representation, but it doesn't all fall on your agent. We actually rely a lot on the relationships that people have and that they're creating, and you really want to have your own personal relationships. So that's definitely something important, just to kind of really be out there and mingling with the people that you potentially want to be collaborating.
Yeah.
And I think also, like, honestly trickles into what I was going to say, coming into this being more on the PR side, my recommendations is somehow similar, but also a little different. I think that the biggest thing for me from a PR perspective is like establishing your brand story. So figuring out like what differentiates you, what makes you exciting, what you're inspired by, and being able to like carefully and succinctly articulate that in like interview situations, whether that's press or whether that's business interviews. And that kind of trickles into like your networking, like Arbel was just saying, because you need to be able to like impress and leave a memory with people you're interacting with. Because I think that at the end of the day, there's so many talented people in the global Hollywood community that you need to differentiate yourself by who and how you contribute to community, how you help others, and how you look to be a collaborative, piece of talent that looks to uplift a variety of projects. So I think, there's lots of things you can do to do that. And it just starts with making a plan and taking it one step at a time.
Yeah, definitely. And, you talked on differentiators as well. And obviously all of you guys come from slightly different backgrounds. So Arbel, I'd love to start with you here, but How do you go about choosing the talent that you represent, and what are you really looking for from prospective artists that you're looking to work with?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one I get a lot actually. It's a very nuanced thing. I think it's always this mystical thing that people are trying, especially in the composing world, we're trying to figure out, when do they approach an agent, do they not, how to navigate that. I'm looking at a lot at like what people are doing. And look, the thing too, I will just say is like it's just very nuanced. It's different with each person, and I think it's even everyone here can probably agree, like it's just different, even based on who the representative is. People have different tastes, different things that they're excited by. So there's no real like one answer. But personally, like it's a mix of kind of, I want to be excited about the people I work with. Personality is a really big important thing. I really like to listen to the music, so I'm always listening to, if I'm hearing what we were talking about before, like, is there something that stands out, something that differentiates them, that I know that I can take and market to people? Because ultimately, like, we're kind of glorified like sales and marketing people, and so like, I'm always thinking about like, how am I going to pitch this person? And so there's a lot of these different elements that I kind of have to fall into place, and I do work with a lot of developing or emerging talent, but at the same time, it's like they still have to have a certain amount of momentum going on for them that I can now jump in and build off of. So those are the types of things I'm looking for usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. It's same, and then it's a nuanced thing also for us. There are 4 agents and we collectively rep everyone. So it's very much hearing the input from each of the agents, because we'll all meet with someone. And, just like Arbel said, personality is a big thing. I mean, ultimately, the first thing is we look at their resume and determine, do we think we can sell them based on credits, like, or if they're a build, what does that look like? So we like really do put a lot of thought into it, because it's as again a smaller company, it's not like, come on board everyone, let's go in and we'll just figure it out, because then that personal relationship, which I'm sure we'll get into too later, kind of falls through the cracks when you're just like, yes, give me 200 clients.
Yeah.
You get the personal
There's value. Yeah.
Exactly.
And choosing. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I mean, I think the points were stated very well. I'd like to try to add to it. I think obviously now I'm a little bit older, 45 now, I just turned, and I think like it's changed over time as a manager. And now where I'm personally at with my boutique, management company, while I try to juggle a day job as well as being a writer director, is that for me, it's very important that I truly connect with the art of the creative person that I'm representing, no matter where in the scale of their career they're at. I think that's really important, because that excites me to make sure that I spend the time on them and be honorable in the way I work towards basically pushing their career. Otherwise, I'm just doing it for the paycheck. And at this age now, I figured out that in the long run, that doesn't work. It either doesn't work in the way you present that person to the outside world, and it's not fair to them, or you're not really just being fair to yourself. And then secondarily, and this might sound a little vague, I think for me, trying to spend some time and engage whether or not you're on the same sort of work ethic, as well as other ethical manners of what the person is about. I think meeting on those grounds and having common denominators on the ethical front is really important to me, because I've represented artists that were really, as they call them in the industry, whales, and I've worked with them for several years. And then you've gotten to a point where you realize you really just did it for the paycheck, or their caliber of their success. And yes, I was able to add, or my team was able to add to their success, but we got to a point where ethically we were in a different place, and things just came down to a cataclysmic crash or separation that in the end was more damaging than the time you spent on it. So I think it's really important for us to connect with the talent on so many different levels than just the talent, as well as be inspired by their talent. So it's complicated. It's like a marriage. So now what I do, because obviously, again, like I think like everyone else here, we're a boutique, and we don't have unlimited resources to rep, 50 clients. It's really about spending a little bit of time dating and getting to know each other, representation and client, and ensuring that all of those things match before we kind of take the first dive into working together, if that makes any sense.
And I think, on my side of things, it might be a little bit different, being from the PR side. you know, we're fortunate to have not the most selective process, but you know, we don't work with just anybody, but because our model is, you know, if you're paying a campaign fee, it's a little bit easier for us to take people on. We also have a shorter relationship with people, or it's like usually like a 1 or 2 month campaign, and then it's like kind of on to the next. Although we do consider ourselves to be publicists for life for our clients, and help them in smaller ways in between campaigns. But in terms of like what we look for in terms of opportunity or potential, I think for us, like number one is potential. You know, is there, and if a client comes to us, like, do we see opportunity for them in terms of like, is there ways that we can help grow their career or build their exposure or increase their brand recognition, or is there potential in the project they want to promote, or projects, or a little bit of both? And I think that what I'm always looking for is people who are interested in growing, like people who have a mindset that's like hungry and bold and looking to make things happen, while also still having realistic expectations. Like, don't come to me if you're like doing your first project ever, it's a short film, and want variety, because that's just not realistic. Certainly we can like grow up to that point, but it's something that we need to be understanding what's really possible. And there's certainly steps that can happen, you know, leading up to something like that eventually happening. And then I think the last thing that is important for us is like a desire and an openness to collaborate, because PR campaigns are collaboration. We need to hear from you what you want so we can do what you want. We need you to hear from us what we think is possible so that you understand what we're planning and doing. And, you know, we can't do it by ourselves. It does require buy-in and trust and conversation throughout. And so I'm just looking for people that want to do that and want to hang out, have fun, make things happen, and hopefully, you know, take over the industry together.
Yeah, right. That's the dream. And you know, all of you guys talked about finding ways to really push these people and finding outlets and angles for them to fit into the current trends. So Jen, I would love to know, how do you stay updated on industry trends and upcoming opportunities to best serve your clients and your talent?
Yeah. Well, in terms of industry trends and stuff, we'll all like read that Met Bellany Puck News and all of our deadlines and all of the trade. You know, we do, like, I'm sure everyone does the obvious, like we're all keeping up on the trades. We have admins and coordinators that and a coordinator that help us with all of that, certainly. But outside of that kind of farming info, we stay in touch directly with a lot of folks that who will hire our clients, the production executives, line producers, post executive, whomever. So we talk to them on a regular, even when we're not like, it's not so much of a like one-way incoming call. We'll check in with them on a monthly, or like we're in strike mode right now, so we're easing off a little bit because no one has anything going on. But you know, we keep a rapport that's, you know, measured, where we're not bothering them all the time, but they also then in turn call us when they need something. So we get info from them, and we you know, we stay on top of those connections. Another thing that we find really helpful is we will ask our clients, when we bring them on board, but then it's an evolving thing as we rep them, like, do they have like their quote unquote specialties, like special skills? Like, have you worked with this specific technology before that people have been asking about? Have you cut something that's sports before? Like, were you an equestrian growing up, and therefore this horse movie that we're going to pitch you for, like, we will make whatever connection. I mean, within reason. Like, we're not going to say like they stood in an elevator with this producer once and therefore you should meet them because they looked at each other, like, within reason. But we really do, again, with the competition, as we've talked about, you're up against a lot of people that want to be in this business. We find that pointing out, you know, being specific and pointing those things out based on the pitch and what we're selling them for is also very helpful.
Yeah, I'd love to know, Arbel, your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, very similarly, you know, trying to stay in front of all the trades, you know, have access to, you know, different databases I subscribe to that just kind of keep things up to date as far as like what's going into production or what's in different stages. I do keep an internal database of all the projects that my assistant, a lot of what my assistant does is basically this job, is like kind of keeping tabs on like what's going on. And I also try to like make some of those lists and databases available to my clients so that they can actually have a glimpse in the future of what's coming up and actually shout about like, what do we want to go after, so that also my job is a lot more targeted. But, you know, it's also, I live here in LA, so sometimes I find out about projects like getting going and stuff literally just in a conversation with someone, and just being in circles of people that are working in various parts of the industry, which is also kind of a fun way. Someone will literally like happen to say that they're, like on the production or the art department team on a project, and I'll be like, so that's in production now. Like, and it's just literally because we're just like having brunch. But like Jen said as well, it's like, obviously like our job as the representatives is to be kind of like having those connections also with folks in those positions that are doing the hiring. So ideally, I'm also getting, calls from people when things are getting going, or I'll just might, hit up somebody on a specific team at a certain company and like just run through a few projects that are on my radar and go, where are these things at? And, they'll just kind of give me an update on what's moving now, what's not looking yet, what already hired a composer, who hired a music supervisor, and kind of go with that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Andrew, Cyrus, anything you guys want to add?
Sure. I mean, for me, it's a lot of the same. I think that the best thing to do is constantly be talking to people. I think that I learn a lot from my friends and my colleagues, and whether they're publicists or reps, we're all looking out for each other and finding new ideas and trends. And I think that like we're always like as a company trying to, being a very younger group of people, we always try to position ourselves as being, extra innovative and looking for the new ideas and new platforms. So we're always looking at like the latest developments. I mean, look at with Twitter rebranding to X or whatever, like, is that still a platform that we want to participate in or not? Is Threads, the Instagram thing, the new thing? So these are the kind of things that we're constantly asking ourselves and always looking for new ways to be better. And I think, again, like reading the trades and stuff like that and seeing what's out there, but we're always in pursuit of what's new and what's exciting. And I think luckily, like, we've managed to surround ourselves with great people that we trust and know we can learn from, while also, just kind of consuming wherever and however we can through the news and elsewhere.
For me, this is a challenging one because the exclusive roster that I represent of 5 clients, they're all in such different verticals and lanes and relatively industries that it's so tough to try to keep on top of what's going on in each one. So I've kind of tried to rely on the younger generation than myself in each department, because they had their ears to the ground. So in each vertical, I kind of just try to check in with either it's my assistant or musicians that I represent. And one is in K-pop, one is in electronic music, they're just different lanes. So it's obviously, besides reading the trades in film and in music, it's relatively tough for me to keep on top of this, and I think it's one of my own challenges. But the way I try to remedy it is just basically have conversations with the artists themselves weekly, to sort of see if there might be anything that I may have missed in terms of in the relationships that they are involved in, whether it's like working with artists that obviously we've managed their deals on, as a songwriter or producer, or events that they've toured through, etc. But more importantly, I think it's just about connecting with that specific artist regularly to ensure I'm not missing a beat. And they appreciate that. They understand that I think, I can't keep on top of everything all the time. Information is just moving at such a rapid pace now, as we all know. And, when I had a business that was focused on one vertical, it was much easier. Now it's very challenging. So this question, I think, is actually a challenge that I deal with on a weekly basis. So
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like I'm drowned in lack of information, if that makes any sense. And sometimes I feel like I'm drowned in over information. So it's never really a healthy balance, actually.
Yeah, but you make a great point about one of the key factors just being getting on a call and having those consistent conversations with your talent and with your clients. And I'd love to jump to Andrew for this one. So how does the relationship between a representative and an artist evolve over time?
Sure. I mean, I think that I'm sure that everyone here has some version of this to an extent, but I think the best way that it evolves is that it turns into friendship. I think that we work together so closely for years, hopefully, that we know each other's lives and personal backgrounds and hobbies and interests. And, it makes it a lot more fun for me to like get to that point where I can break through and have, more text conversations and phone calls and stuff. And I mean, and beyond just the closeness and understanding, I mean, each time we work together, I don't have to relearn about your shticks and quirks and restrictions, and that you don't like these certain types of publications or these certain questions. Like, I already know that. So we can skip a step of the onboarding and just kind of get going. And I think that, the other thing with PR is that, like, aside from knowing each other better, ideally each campaign is building off of the last one, right? Like, we start out with like more, middle tier press or smaller tier press, and then kind of work our way up, that each time hopefully we're making you bigger and bigger. And like, it's cool that, like, I've had some clients who I've worked with now for 6 or 7 plus years, and we've just broken through to finally get an Emmy nomination with one of them, or we've suddenly getting like the top tier press that was not interested before. So it's really like rewarding to just see the hard work pay off and see that PR can snowball like that. And I think that hopefully, what I always say is like see us as an extension of yourself. Like, we are part of your brain, we are part of your brain trust, and that we want to be there for you in each and every big decision, marketing decision that you have. So I'm hopeful that as we progress over time, there's just greater trust and more productive use of our time and collaboration.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I mean, my relationship with my clients is so important to me. I'm actually just a very personable person, and so like I really like personal relationships anyway. So then putting it into the context of then becoming an agent, I just kind of kept going with that, and I really like working with people that I really enjoy genuinely, and I get more excited about them the more I know about them. Even putting aside their music and everything, it's like and it's also important because a lot of what we're doing is sometimes matchmaking. So it's important for me to know my clients really well and know these little different things. Like I tell people, like, every time I have conversations with different clients, I feel like I'm always absorbing new information that I'm then sort of like regurgitating to other people, because it's like fun little anecdotes or stories or something from their background, or where they're from, or this band that they really love. And then I'm talking to like a music exec, and they mentioned that, and I'm like, oh, well, you'll love this person, like they love that too. Like, we're doing that, and that only comes from, it's not something where I can go and just sit and do an interview and write down information. Like, it's something that comes from spending time together, spending time talking frequently, and building that relationship. And then the fabric of the relationship between a client and a representative is a very deep trust. As I'm a representative, I'm going into a room where they're not there and representing them and talking about them, and I want to have full confidence that they trust that everything I'm saying about them is how they want to be presented to people when they're not in the room. And again, that only really comes from really building that relationship with them. And it's really this like two-way trust.
Yeah, definitely. And like transparency is a thing that's like throughout the relationship, that is very important. And I think like agents get a bad rep for not being transparent, or like dropping off the grid for 3 months or whatever, and then being like, hey, don't have anything for you, talk to you later, bye. Like, if whether it's slow or not, talking to someone and being honest about what the state of the industry is, what might help them. But the other thing is, goals change over time. The clients, some of them don't. Some of them are like, I'm doing this and boom, 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 boom. But some folks, they're on a path and they're working, and then they decide, I want to have a family now, and like, so I'm going to take some time off, and then when I come back from that time off, I'm going to need a 22 episode network series, because I'm going to have to be paying for some private school. Things change and moving with the tides of what the client sees, and it really is whatever their goals are our goals, or so kind of. And the staying in touch and sort of growing with that, and seeing people have kids, and you can't believe how, like, when you've been repping people then for a certain amount of time, it's like, oh, like your baby is a teenager now, and where did that time go? And that's always fun. But it is like you all said, it's like, it becomes like a relationship, almost like extended family, or friends. Yeah.
I'll jump in. I agree with both. I think all of my clients now are basically friends, and they've become really close friends. And we spend, important events together. All the birthdays are together, some even Christmas together, etc. And you know, that trust that Arel mentioned is so important. And also being able to support them through difficult times where it's not just business related. Like, you know, one of my clients, her father unfortunately just got news that he has cancer and she has to move to another country for it. And that means, you know, losing a lot of jobs. That means losing a lot of sort of opportunities in terms of business. But, you know, for me, it wasn't even a question. It was just about being able to adapt to that change. And that comes through, I think, appreciating them as a human being first, and then a client and a number and a gig. And I think that's the kind of relationships that most boutique representation companies sort of, I think, pride themselves on, as everyone does here, it seems. And that's a fabric of how I like to work. I think other than that, I don't see a way of working, because I would also appreciate that same understanding if it came to changes in my life, etc. But yeah, I think developing that friendship also makes removes the boundaries of insecurity, you know, enters into a realm of comfort where then they can be way more expressive creatively as well, which is important, way more comfortable creatively, way more comfortable to take risk. And with that risk can come the greatest reward of finding their true voice, as we discovered earlier. So I think the you know, as long as obviously there's certain boundaries in effect, the closer you become as friends and colleagues, the easier it is to communicate, the easier and more comfortable it is to sort of express, and that can only lead to new conversations and better ways of moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And you lead us sort of right into our next question. And you're talking about, you know, clients over time getting more comfortable artistically and creatively and putting themselves out there. And I think, Jen, this leads back to something that you had previously noted about really this space that we're in is almost a cross of sales and marketing. And you guys really have to find those angles for your clients. So I'm wondering, do you believe that representation plays a role in helping clients develop themselves artistically in that branding narrative?
I think definitely, and for the sheer fact that there's exposure, you're being exposed to, if you come from, you know, not having someone that's kind of looking through all of the different sources and talking to the different people all the time, like your world for exposure opens up once you have that. So just based on that, but I think knowing what the client wants and keeping track of, I think I said this a little bit earlier, like keeping track of what they want and what we think might help that maybe they like. Also a big thing with us is, or that we'll see with clients, is they might not we'll bring a project and at first glance it doesn't look appealing, whatever, but we might say take the meeting, because you might find something, they might tell you something more redeeming about it that you didn't realize, and that might change your mind. But B, this director has worked with X before, and even if this project isn't a fit, you should still get in front of them, because so often people will meet with someone and it maybe doesn't work out for whatever reason for that job. We just had this happen yesterday. Someone called for another person, they met with them last year. We would love to have them on a film, like great, amazing. And our client was like, that's so weird. I just thought that meeting went so poorly. Like I was sure that I insulted that guy 15 times in the meeting. I'm like, you clearly didn't, because they were like calling specifically for you, wanting the opportunity to work with you. So having that evolution also comes with like having someone else's perspective. Because you can get in your head. I mean, we can get in our heads too, but like as an artist, you're thinking about, oh my God, and it's like, no, like take a step back. And that's like an ongoing, I think, helpful thing for both parties.
Yeah, I think with composers, you know, a lot of what I'm doing as well is it's not just that sort of outward, like, you know, seeking out the projects and all that, is like internally also doing a lot of strategizing with my clients. And a lot of times in those sessions, if we might be touching base after it's been a few months, to just kind of be like, what are the next things we're wanting to like try to go after? Where are you at now? You know, I think Jen touched on this a little bit too, where it's like, it's really kind of fun actually to see sometimes as people are moving along, where suddenly their trajectory of like what they want to work on starts evolving and everything. So it's like we kind of constantly have to be in that. And sometimes in those sessions, like I end up also challenging my clients a little bit too, or maybe I'm putting a project in front of them that they wouldn't have thought of really going after or thinking about, but then they're like, oh, like I actually kind of have an idea of what I would do for this. And like, maybe this last score I wrote could actually translate into this new realm or what, and so I think some of that artistic evolution sometimes happens there. And personally, it's really fun to be part of that. And I'm not going to just like outright say I'm like influencing that or something, but I think it's more just kind of like being this like slightly outside objective like sounding board, and being able to kind of, or like even sometimes just holding up a mirror kind of like that, where it's like I'm hearing things they're saying or they're talking about or they're doing that they're maybe not as consciously aware of, and I'm going, well, you realize you've been doing this, and then it suddenly like unlocks this thing that maybe kind of can start giving new ideas and things like that. So I would say that's probably kind of like where that contribution comes from on my end.
Andrew, Cyrus, anything you guys want to add to that?
Sure. I think as managers, we wear so many hats. One day we're, helping do accounting. Another day we're strategizing in terms of what the next steps should be. And then another day, if it's a musician client, I'm in the studio with them giving feedback on a record or a song. Or if it's like now I have a director client, I'm constantly giving feedback on creative. And then the next day you're sort of a therapist, even though you don't have a therapist degree. So there's a constant involvement in an artist's life as a manager. And I hope that also, it surely does, help with the evolution of my own path as a manager as well. I'm assuming that for sure it does help an artist evolve. As long as they're there and they're happy, they're most likely evolving as a part of their osmosis with you as a manager. So I don't think it's far-fetched to think or believe that, their career is developing artistically as a result of your existence in their career life and business as a manager. And I think that's the key word here is evolution. I think if you're not growing, you're dying. So if together you are not being constructive and you're not, if as a manager, you're not able to feed back on creative and or strategic that is really not beneficial to them, in time that will start to show and stale. And at some point you either part ways, or if you stay in it, you've stayed in a relationship that's probably past its expiry date. But usually and hopefully it's evolving, and that's the best thing for an artist is evolution, and their willingness to be courageous to change constantly with the changing times.
I think on my side, in terms of like artistic evolution, and I'm not sure that the PR role is as much involved with that. I mean, occasionally, sure, like I'll give feedback on which piece of music I think is best for an exclusive. But I think that where we kind of see the evolution happening is in a few ways. Number one, it's in how their brand story evolves, like if their interests or goals change. And sort of similar to that, it's how confident they are in telling their brand story and how like, succinct they are in their talking points and their ability to take control of the interview. So I think that like that confidence and that, presentation just gets more nuanced and developed over time. But I think where we do find a lot of evolution with our clients in our collaborations is their marketing and PR instincts. Because the first thing I always say is like, we want to train our clients so they know when to hit us up in the future, like help themselves, which helps us. Because being like aware of important things like lead time. So like letting us, rather than the first time when we hit them up and we started the campaign a week before the premiere, they know the next time that we should start talking about it 2 months in advance, or at least a month in advance. So like being more on top of like, advocating for themselves with us. And then similarly, it's about like these certain like creative muscles, such as like documenting your process and filming things and photographing things and thinking about like what are the PR angles or opportunities within certain projects, and trying to create them if there aren't any without it being too gimmicky. So I think that just it's about evolving them as PR collaborators, and that way we can just do our job better and have more promotional tools in our toolkit.
So Andrew, how do you measure success as representative, and what do you consider to be the most rewarding aspect of your work?
I think for me, when we talk about success in PR, I think there's two sides. There's the tangible side, which is like, did you get, X number of press interviews or high profile exposure opportunities or panels? So there's like the tangible is like, what stuff did we generate or collaborate on building together? And it could be things like improving your Google search results and having a more, a system around your networking, around your social media. But then there's the intangible, which I think is sometimes just as important, which is something we call the oh yeah test. And the oh yeah test is when you suddenly, introduce yourself at an event, or a premiere or in a business conversation, and someone's like, oh yeah, like I already know you. I read about you in so and so thing, or I heard about you from so and so person. And like that's the kind of thing that's super valuable in an industry that's like built around perception and brand recognition. And so I think it's important to balance the tangible with the intangible. And the real thing also is like, this is sort of a little unrelated, but like I think that the important thing for people to realize with PR is that PR is a piece of the puzzle. It's a part of your career, it's a part of your team. And certainly it does some things, and we hope that it leads to like inbound and phone calls. But what's really important is to not rest on your laurels and find ways to be proactive. Now that your Google search results are better, how can you, put yourself out there in more events, or how can you work with your agent or manager to pursue more things? Because now we know that when they Google search you, it's like, oh wow, they're cool, they're people are talking them up and saying nice things. And so I think that like there's definitely a lot of different ways to define success. But in terms of the most rewarding part of my job, I think it's just like getting a chance to like get to know and grow with people over time and see like how people who are not so ticky-tack about like, oh, you promised me these 5 things, I got these 4 things. If people buy into the process and understand that takes time, we need to build over time, and people who work with us for years, it's just really rewarding to see how they're ascending in their careers and like getting to like these higher profile projects and awards and stuff like that. And it's just exciting that when they're able to like refer me their underlings who are now also building their way up and stuff. So I think it's just exciting just to see how things progress and how our network continues to expand. And of course the other reps I get to meet along the way, such as people on this call, which is super fun to collaborate with them time and time again. So yeah, those are some of the things that come to mind.
Yeah. Also from like a referral perspective as well, like when clients refer other clients who end up being, or friends who have colleagues who end up being clients or their assistants, we get that with, we have a lot of editors, so we have that with we'll rep an editor for a number of years, and then the assistant is finally at the point where it makes sense, and then we'll talk whatever. So it is because that it kind of lends itself to like what can be a more familial, but not in a dysfunctional way, familial feeling of the representation and the group as a whole. But yeah, honestly, everything that Andrew said, like it's great to see people hit those milestones, even just like certain from smaller tangible things, like, oh, we finally got this person in front of this other person, in front of this executive for a general meeting or whatever, and that's going to turn the tide. So even just small things like that, like knowing that that makes a difference, because it does. A small little meeting can change the world. No, change someone's world.
Yeah, I'll add to that too. And like also I've had that as well, where it's like we built for a while to try and get like a really prominent meeting for someone, but then also sometimes if it's maybe somebody, people starting to reach out for a person, but like exactly for like what they should be reaching out for them for, like they're thinking of them, and it's just kind of like, yeah, okay, like because like we said, like we're basically marketing people, and it's not just like at least for me, and I'm sure for all of us, like I was talking about, I'm doing a lot of strategizing with clients all the time. And so, that strategy is about starting to get them on this path and move down this path toward this like goal of, whatever the types of projects are that they really want to be sort of living in. And so, it feels like a lot of success whenever we're like landing something that really is just on that path. And that's like really exciting when a client is like getting a project that they just really wanted, or that they just feel is just so in their zone, and we get to celebrate that together. But then, yeah, like I was saying, like people calling for those projects, thinking of that person in that capacity, it's like, okay, like we've been like the groundwork we've been laying down it's been good. It's been the right groundwork. And here, even if it took time or whatever, it's like, sometimes you're putting, like I tell a lot of people, I tell clients, I tell prospective clients, like you have to have so much faith. Like you have to, like if you're putting like your best foot forward, you're putting all the right things out. Like people have a lot going on. There's like different things happening at different times. And I've had it happen so many times where it's like, okay, like we're not getting a response from this person or whatever. And then like a couple months later, out of the blue, they're just like, I've been like waiting for the opportunity to reach out about this person. And like, I have finally have the project that I want to consider her for, or like things like that, you know, and it's like, that's such a win, you know, whether they end up landing the project later or whatever, you know, it's like being in consideration for the things and being perceived as in the like way you want to be perceived is like such a win, because the more and more you're doing that, it's just like you're going to be landing those things, you know. You can't control landing it, but you can control a bit of like where you get positioned and where you put. And so it's obviously what we're all out here doing.
I'll add a little point on Jan's point. I actually call them small little victories, and you know what they are. You know, whether it's an email or whether it's a little gig, whatever it is. You know, just making those little inch steps forward. I think they accumulate exponentially into a much larger success across the span of a longer period, like 6 months or a year. So like I like to basically make plans for clients, short as well as long term. The short terms one are usually within a 3 month period, and see what we can actually get accomplished within that time. I always think even if it's a arbitrary deadline, it always really works well to just get things done, rather than just meandering. And there are the clients that I work with that I have that they don't like the deadlines, and I've noticed how things don't really work as well. Like it's nice to have freedom, but when you encapsulate something in a specific amount of time, I'm not sure if everyone else agrees, you kind of make it live. It's a live wire at that point. But also just getting a bit more specific about measuring success. It really depends on the actual talent itself. If they're more of a up and comer or a startup act, what I just said matters. If they're more established, like one of our clients, Ebby, he's an arena act. So for us, that victory is ensuring that a show where we have like a 35-person band, and the complexities of doing a live arena show like across the world somewhere else, where we're hiring help that are not usually our staff, that show goes well at the end of the night and actually doesn't goes on without a hitch. For us, that's a victory, because the tiniest thing could throw that show off. But I think, and then this might sound funny, but it's true. Whereas I only have one film client, so I'm just getting to learn the ropes of actually being a rep in the film world. But in the music business, we go by the biblical words of Shep Gordon, the infamous Alice Cooper manager, where he was like, his 3 codes are: get the money, never forget to get the money, always remember to never forget to get the money. And in the music business, that's very true. I'm not sure in your world, Arbel, because obviously you're in music as well, but you're more a composer, so like film world. But in the mainstream music business, even if you've gotten the gig and you feel like, oh, it's time to celebrate, and we've had a record out, or we did a record for someone else and we produced this, or we are owed money now by Universal Records or Sony or etc., getting that money from them is going to take time, and it takes probably more emails to get that than it is, or phone calls, than to actually get the gig. So for us, it's almost a victory when we actually collect the money. I'm proud to say that
it doesn't change much when you get into film.
It doesn't? Okay.
Once you're working in like the bigger
I don't know,
like studio systems and stuff, it's like
I can't imagine it being those, but yeah. But yeah, for us also, for me as a manager, it's that as well, the rewarding aspect of making sure that the client is paid, because they need to live and they need to pay their bills, and they've done the work, so they deserve to be paid. So there's always that aspect that obviously people don't talk about often, but it's the truth.
Definitely. I mean, there is a business aspect to this all, and I think it's important that, we're transparent on that front and talking about that and bringing it up. So I think it's a great point that you make there, Cyrus. And each of you sort of talked about trying to plan for the success, or at least as much as you can, really set yourselves up and your clients up for success. And a lot of that requires being, again, aware of those industry trends. And obviously the industry is constantly changing, but Cyrus, back to you. I would love to know, especially within these last few years, we have seen the industry change so much. And how have you seen it evolve since you started?
Are you speaking specifically of the music industry, or like the industry of my POV as a manager?
We could do both. I'm kind of curious to hear both.
Because, my new business is sort of like, multifaceted, where I like just remain excited by representing artists in different verticals. But I think obviously the biggest music industry change, and that's still constantly going, is the medium in which, music is consumed. That obviously now is affecting the film world in such a big way, but I can speak more about music because that's been an 18-year experience. I think that's constantly changing, and every 6 months we see a difference in how artists are paid, how accounting is done, how music publishing as well as royalties on the master side are accumulated and accounted for, and laws are changing. And so this is the biggest factor, because if you're not a live touring act, which again, minus COVID, it has its own obviously changes that constantly happen. But if you're live touring, you have 60 to 70 to 80% of your income coming from that side, whether you're a small live touring act or you're a megastar. Other artists who don't have that luxury of being a live touring act yet in the music industry, they rely on whatever money they make from music sales and or streaming and or their publishing deals, and that's constantly shifting and changing. And things also take an immense amount of time these days for that money to be accounted for. So coming back to that point of money, this is a huge aspect, because the unfortunate thing that I have seen over the past 3 to 4 years especially is that the income stream has been so dry per se in that world for people that are basically barely making any money to survive. So I have seen many artists, songwriters, producers, artists, not my own clients, but people that we work with, and allies or friends, basically have to move out of Los Angeles, where it's kind of the hub of the creative world in music, or have to take on second jobs. This is a huge factor that hopefully is going to change with changing laws in the music streaming world. But that is the biggest challenge, I think, because we're losing creatives based on this aspect. And I think now we're facing this obviously big time in the film world. And it's the most important battle, I think, for all people in the industry to sort of be involved in and engaged in, because if there is no money going to the artists, we're going to lose creatives that may one day change the world with their art, whether it's their music or film. So I would say that's my one point I would want to make.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead, Jen?
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, please. Okay. Well, I would say, something positive that I think is changing, evolving, not as fast as I think we'd like, but still happening, is at least in the composer world and the music and media world, is giving opportunity to people who've been largely underrepresented until now. When I started Spectra, I really built a mission into it to focus in on people from underrepresented backgrounds, and just a focus on diversity in building the roster. And it's been really, really nice to actually see a lot of the efforts that are being made in different teams and in different productions to really consider people who were largely not always in consideration. You can't really force anyone to hire anybody. Ultimately, you want to hire the person you feel like is going to create the best score or soundtrack, or be the best collaborator. But people can't get hired if they're not in consideration. So just getting more people into consideration is a really big step. And I know there's a lot of teams out there that are actually, like talking about like on the music teams, that are might be getting a list of potential candidates from like a showrunner or a director, like, oh, here's some people, here's 5 names of people I'm interested in, and they're all straight white men and amazing composers, but they might go back and go, that's great names here. Can we give you 3 more names to consider? Can we give you 5 more names to consider? Just take a listen, just things like that. And that's amazing. Like, that wasn't really happening in such a concerted way. So seeing that happen is really amazing. But I think also just kind of like looking more broadly at the industry and everything, nowadays, there's been so much more happening with like series versus film, which used to be very much the other way around. And then there's, a lot of like really unfortunate, struggles with, which is I think what a lot, SAG and the WGA are fighting against as well, is, this trend now of the streamers removing content, that takes away a really big income stream for composers that they really rely on. People who used to buy houses from like the royalties they were earning from working on a great series. And if that's removed, I mean, that's literally just lopping off that income stream completely. And so that's, that's a big thing. That's a really big thing to consider now, because if we're talking about now, it's like we have to focus in so much more on like where can we get the upfront fees, because it used to be like, okay, maybe we'll concede here on this type of project because it's going to go like broadcast somewhere, and we know that you're going to like make some good money on the back end. But it's like there's so much uncertainty with that now that it's like you can't rely on it anymore. So that's like a shift that's really been happening a lot over time, and obviously coming to a head right now, which is great.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, we're like also technically in the middle of another shift, and we don't know, like like this is, you know, yeah, I would say everything that everyone said, but specifically Cyrus, what you said about moving, or people having to move, that has been a very common trend for our clients. Like, I mean, certainly pandemic and forward, and it's been much more like widely accepted. Like there has been kind of not a mass exodus from the cities, but we certainly have way more clients. Like before that time, if someone was like, I'm going to move to Nashville, we'd be like, okay, cool. Like we'll figure out how, but there's so much more. And part of that is time and technology and so many things making it easier. You know, that's like the evolution of the world and everything else. But that is certainly something that has changed hugely, the amount of content. Speaking, you know, narrative film and television specifically, like, yes, I mean, I guess there's tons of content everywhere, but from, you know, from streaming through the pandemic time, and especially like the surges of there have been a lot of ebbs and flows. I mean, which is again the industry. I feel like I'm talking in generalizations, but like very noticeable like surges in content and need, to then, like I was saying, where we are now, where we're kind of in the midst of this other shift, where they're writing off shows off of things. It's a tax write-off, and like, what does that mean? Like, will we see a surge of that amount of content like come back? Like, questions. So yeah, it's been just like and we don't fax anymore. We don't send requests through fax. That's we don't. That was I came back to the industry about 10 years ago, but I started in repping below the line in the mid 2000s, just briefly, and so like that was the biggest change between then and now. I'm coming back 10 years ago. It's like, well, we don't fax
Maybe fax will come back like
resumes
vinyl
anymore. Maybe.
Let's bring fax back. I say let's bring it back.
Well, on the flip side of that too, though, there's like now we have it like such immediate technology that it's like, I've had to draw lines with clients, so it's like you can't just text me at any time you feel like it, or like I need you to put stuff in an email so I can refer to it later. Like that's something that when I also was like an agent for a couple of years, then worked in publishing and came back to being an agent, and that was something that shifted a lot, even in just a couple of years, where it was like it's just easier and quicker. And I agree. I mean, like I stop myself sometimes from doing it too when it's like, oh, maybe this should be an email. But yeah, it's like it's something you don't think about till you suddenly are just like, wait, like how do I find that like thing that they were telling me about? And I'm just like, oh right, it's somewhere buried in a text message.
Yeah, processes and all of that have changed.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of have to be organized to a certain degree, to keep track of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think everyone did a good job with like the whole industry changes. So I'll talk about PR changes. I think that, the biggest thing I've been noticing is there's less publications. There's a lot of media consolidation. Like the same company, PMC, now owns or operates
like everyone.
Everyone, like Deadline, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, IndieWire, Gold Derby. Basically, everyone except the wrap of the major trades is one company. And so it's a lot more challenging to like break through there because they're consolidating their teams, and there's a lot of like pay for play stuff going on. And so we need to find new and exciting ways to like galvanize interest around our clients. And I also just think in general, like press is dinosauring out. I think that there are certain campaigns, certain awards, and certain high profile releases that it makes sense to do press. But I think that in an everyday campaign, it's important to diversify the marketing strategies that you're utilizing. I think there's a lot more of an emphasis on social media these days. It's important to have some sort of participation there. Using tools on those platforms like Instagram Live are super powerful. I also have been noticing a lot of expansion towards newsletters, and not only newsletters by like clients specifically or artists specifically, but also like Puck and things like that. These almost like trade type publications that are exclusively in newsletter form, or morning brew. And we've also seen a lot of interest growing in more panels and ways where people can not only promote themselves, but be promoted next to other people and get a bunch of content out of it and networking exposure and fun audiences. So I think it's always evolving, and it's important just to keep up with the Joneses with that kind of stuff. And if anyone's watching this right now and has a new idea, we're always down for new ideas and direction too.
Definitely always down for new ideas and direction. And thank you guys for all of that insight. And I'd love to close out the conversation by starting with Arbel, asking each of you what advice you would give to currently unrepresented artists possibly looking for a manager or a publicist in the future.
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say is don't stop what you're doing. It's, I think the biggest mistake people make, specifically talking about composers or music supervisors, is deciding that, okay, I need an agent now, and then kind of convincing yourself that like you're just not going to get anything else if you don't have an agent, and then that's all you suddenly focus on. Because again, like going back to like the first question or second question, what we're looking for is someone who has momentum that we can jump in and join in on and build on. And if you don't have that going on, it's going to be really, really difficult. I use the metaphor of like the difference between kind of like standing flat-footed on the ground and trying to jump in the air, or like getting up on a ledge and kind of jumping up from there. You're going to go a lot higher. And that's kind of like what I'm always thinking of. It's like, it's really hard if I'm just grabbing someone who just doesn't have enough that I can market and work on and get people excited about. But if they're just trucking along and it's like this train that's going by and I'm like, okay, jump on, then obviously we're going to be a lot more successful. So, I think the biggest thing is just like keep doing what you're doing, kind of what we talked about before, like hone your sound, hone your craft, and just keep trucking forward. And then, when the agent thing happens, like see it as this like, great, this person's going to maybe open some new doors for me and put me in front of some new people that I couldn't access before. But, we're not going to just make something out of nothing. And so, you just got to keep doing your thing. It's still your career. I think that's a really big thing. It's your career. I come in, I try to support it. I try to build on it and help you build it and strategize around it. But it's your career. And if you're not taking care of it and nourishing it, I can't do that for someone, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think to add to that, it's obviously we all know that it's tough to be a creative, whatever your lane is, whether you're a musician or you're a filmmaker, etc. I think, if you're a filmmaker, I advise keep making films, whether short films, etc. And it's always going to be tough. It's easier said than done. I mean, I'm one myself as well. So it's tough to constantly create film because film is expensive. Even if you're doing a short, it costs money. And if you're not coming from money and you don't have a source of funds, then you just got to kind of just pull sources of funds together somehow, beg, borrow, and steal, and to keep constantly making films till you get noticed. And, I know filmmakers who've gotten noticed off of one short, and I know great ones after so many that I haven't gotten noticed. And that's always a very tough part of, I think, being an artist and getting noticed by representation, because you believe representation is going to open those doors for you. And I think, yes, reps can open obviously huge doors and open a world of connections that you don't have. But I think the tricky part of being a creative and trying to make a living and getting noticed in whatever vertical you're in, musician, etc., is to just find a way to keep going. And I think if you have art in your soul and need to express that, and there is no other way to live other than expressing it, you'll just have to keep staying in it, as Arbel said, no matter what challenges and difficulties. And then one day, either with or without a rep, you'll get noticed. And, I've seen people do it without reps as well. It's not always about that. From a creative perspective, I can also talk about this because I tried to find a rep to represent me on a project that I had that was a documentary. And for 3-4 years, I didn't find that. And I'm a manager myself, but I wasn't getting responses back on that project. In the end, I went and raised the money myself and made the doc myself and produced it and directed it, etc. So again, it was tough, but I think I had to get to a point to give up on finding reps. And then I just went and did it myself. So I think it's a tricky thing, finding a rep. and finding the right rep, because it's not just about finding one, it's about finding one that you connect with. So yeah, I don't know if that
Yeah,
helps.
don't say yes to the first person that says yes to you.
Exactly.
I think
Yeah,
that's what I tell
exactly.
people. I'm just like, you got to meet people, and because it's such an important relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah. And also don't stay too long if this is more for after you get an agent. But like that's another kind of jumping off of that is like if you get into a relationship with an agent and it's not feeling great for whatever reason. We've had so many people come to us and be like, you know, I've been with this person for 10 years or whatever, and it hasn't felt great for the last 6 or 7. It's like, well, okay, you know, don't, if things don't feel right for whatever reason, like it's not that you should like jump around from agent to agent all the time, but you know, don't stay in something that's not functioning. But the
Yeah.
other thing I would say, like everything, by the way, ditto to everyone. To add one thing that's specific to like film and TV, the behind the scenes stuff is like getting involved with the guilds and trade organizations have tons of and internship opportunities, but also like mixers, different that they have a diversity committee or program. They have for specific other avenues. Like they're each guild and trade organization has their own thing, and I would highly recommend that because we as agents also work. Like I mentioned, we rep a lot of editors. We do a lot of work with the American Cinema Editors, ACE, and the events that they have, and that's like it's a great place for editors to meet other editors. Editors who are now producers and producing their own shows are there at those things. So that you know, going to that whatever that is for you person and your specific gig or art, find the trade organization, see what they've got going on.
And I think from my side, I would say that, you know, it's never too early to start thinking about your PR, even in your first project ever. I mean, certainly not every project, you know, justifies a full push or hiring a PR person, but there's definitely a lot of things you can do yourself. You can be doing social media, you can be doing your own press outreach to places, you know, creating your own newsletter, putting yourself out there, attending events, looking for panels, advocating for yourself. So there's a lot you can do yourself. It's also never too early to have a conversation with us. I mean, at Impact, we're very open to having intro calls and again, helping you help yourself, helping you strategize and know when is the right time to bring us on. So we're always open. Like we do lots of fun and free intro calls and sometimes in-person events and mixers. So just keep an eye out for us. And yeah, like just, you know, your brand is part of your business. And just like any business, you need to dedicate some percentage of your income or time towards marketing yourself. That's half the job, is making the work and then making sure people notice it or notice your work on it. So don't forget that. And yeah, I hope that we can all make some cool stuff happen together.
Definitely. Thank you guys all again. And thank you all for taking the time to be with us today and for giving us the opportunity to listen into this amazing conversation. It's been really fun listening to you guys bounce off of each other and just give us different insight into each of your different parts of the industry. And that is unfortunately all the time that we have for today. And I just want to again say thank you to our panelists, Cyrus, Arbel, Jen, and Andrew. And thank you as well to Impact 24 PR for being able to put this panel together, and all of you for watching and listening to our conversation. And be sure to check out our Entourage and the Real Deal Happy Hour for more events just like this and networking opportunities. And we will see you all next time.